This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I think it's the kind of culture that we have here. The organization's done a great job bringing in phenomenal guys. And yeah, it's a competitive camp, but we're all fighting for spots, but we're all fighting with each other here. You know, we want to win at the end of the day. Obviously, everyone wants to be in the lineup, but at the end of the day, we want the organization to win, and that's the most important thing.
At the end of the day, we want the organization to win. Winning they have.
Yeah.
For a while, and also in the preseason. We talked about it. I'm not sure it means a ton, but you'd rather win 5 in a row than lose 5 in a row. It makes us all feel better as I'm frozen here, as at least I'm looking at the
yes.
camera. And
your smile is very
Should I go off camera
though.
Here?
I hear you fine.
You hear me fine. Maybe I'll go off camera. There we go. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. We'll just do that until I come back. But we do have some news, and I told you before the show, a lot of good stuff to talk about today because of the roster cuts, everybody anticipating who was going to be staying, who was going to be going down. The reality is, too, partner, there is a lot of anticipation who's going to start the year, but oftentimes coaches, players will tell you maybe it's not how you start, it's how you finish in a lot of ways, but also for the players. You know, who is with you towards the end of the year heading into the playoffs, that's probably more important. But because this is so fresh and so new and everything it feels a little different for the start of the NHL season, it is pretty cool to see where certain players are right now and that fight for a couple of spots. And the Lightning, as they get set to take on the Panthers tonight, and we'll give you what those rosters are going to look like tonight to be in the lineup. The Lightning made some moves and, maybe a couple of surprising moves from our perspective.
Well, I think that as the preseason rolled on, we kind of thought Finley would be on the opening roster, and the moves yesterday, if not cemented that conclusion, certainly leads us to believe it's very, very likely to happen. So the Lightning had 7 cuts yesterday. So remember, Scott Sabourin was put on waivers and reassigned. Then he was called back up for the Orlando game. Maybe in part because Dominic James was day-to-day with an injury. Unclear exactly, maybe because they were expecting some rough stuff and Sabourin can handle himself. Anyway, he was one of the 7, but he kind of was already a guy that was slated to go to Syracuse. So Sabourin was reassigned because he had already cleared waivers. Remember, you have 30 days once a player clears waivers, and then he can move up and down without having to go through waivers again. Dylan Duke, who's in his second-year pro, was sent down, waiver exempt. Roman Schmidt, also waiver exempt, sent down. And Stahoviak, waiver exempt, sent down. So those are the 4 that were waiver exempt. 3 others were put on waivers. We'll get the news of any waiver claims today at 2, which is in a couple of hours. Those 3 players are Nick Abruzzese, Boris Kachuk, and Jacob Peltier. So remember, we were talking about essentially like 7 forwards are battling for these last 2 spots, and the Lightning just reassigned 6 forwards and a defenseman, Roman Schmidt. Now, one of those 6 forwards, Sabourin, had already gone down. So of the 7 that we were talking about, 5 are no longer on the roster. The 2 that have remained are Jack Finley and Dominic James. Dominic James is now healthy. He's in the lineup tonight. So what do we make of this? And then the other thing I should mention is that they have 8 defensemen. So the Lightning have 26 players left on their roster. One of those players, Nick Paul, is injured. So for all intents and purposes, it's 25. Let me get to the lineup tonight just so we know who's in and who's out. So you dress 20. So of the 26, take Paul out. That's 25. Vasilevsky's not dressing tonight. They still have Halverson and Johansson. That takes you to 24. The 4 players who are not dressing tonight, Hedman, who has been nicked up since last weekend in the preseason, McDonough, who is not nicked up, Holmberg, who is coming back from being nicked up but not in the lineup tonight, and Gergensons. So everybody else is in the lineup tonight, and we can go through the lines as they ran them this morning and, the defense combinations. But essentially what you're seeing is mostly the NHL team with some notable exceptions. Hedman, McDonough, Vasilevsky. Panthers are much the same. And I can tell you who they are addressing. But I think the fans are wondering, first of all, why were these moves made days in advance of the roster deadline. And in particular, why were the players who had to go through waivers put through waivers now as opposed to over the weekend? And I actually think that, look, it may backfire. Maybe one of these guys is going to get claimed. And remember, like, Finley could still go down and would have to clear waivers. Declan Carlisle, who is still with the NHL team, could go down, and he would have to clear waivers. But as it relates really to Peltier and Kachuk, I think this is actually a genius move by Julien Brisebois, because when we were having this discussion as it related to Finley, Greg, and you were like, I'm concerned Finley will get claimed. And I'm saying teams are looking to make the last cut or the last two cuts, let's say at the forward position. And if you're going to claim a forward, that means you're making a third cut. So you're bringing in somebody else that you haven't seen through preseason and basically supplanting not just your last two cuts, but the last guy you were going to keep. You really have to want a player to claim him on waivers. If you do it a few days earlier, most teams are not even at the point where they're doing their final cuts. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, I don't know how this is going to play out, and I don't remember specifically in years past that the Lightning have done this kind of on the earlier side of things. But, I mean, if you look around the NHL, most teams, their roster is like in the mid to high 20s, low 30s. So, again, it kind of goes to you really have to want a player to claim that player, and to keep that player needs to stay in the NHL. What are the odds that a team is going to grab Kachuk and Peltier when they already have to make like 8 other cuts at this point? If you wait until Sunday, maybe for teams, they've already like kind of made up their mind about who's going, who's staying. I just think there's a lot more uncertainty for each individual team, because just like Lightning fans are focused on the Lightning fans are not focused on the last cuts that Colorado might be making. Who knows what's happening in Denver for us, right? But in Denver, the Colorado Avalanche fans are focused on the players that have been battling for those last few spots, and their management has a job to do and kind of keep their finger on the pulse of what's going on around the league. But I don't know. I think that it makes a lot of sense that they put these guys through waivers a little earlier. And if they clear, again, you don't have to send them down right away, even though the release said for the purpose of reassignment. But like Sabourin, if a player clears, now you get that back and forth without waivers for 30 days. The Lightning could theoretically call back up Kachuk or Peltier and put them on the opening night roster. I don't know if that's going to happen. But again, we're going to find out at 2:00. But right now, like, the move kind of makes a lot of sense to me just because there's a lot of traffic for other teams on their roster. Now, what does this mean about Carlisle? Why do the Lightning keep 8 defensemen when we've kind of expecting that they're going to keep 7? It could be the Victor Hedman situation. It could be. I mean, Heddy hasn't skated since he left last weekend's preseason game, unlike Holmberg, who is at least skated, even though Holmberg's not playing tonight. Maybe they're keeping Carlisle for insurance. Maybe they want 8 defensemen for the last 2 preseason games if they feel Hedman can't play in either of those. Yeah. And then they're going to put Carlisle through waivers. Because I do think that the other 7 are the 7 they're going to start the year on the NHL roster, unless Hedman has to start on the injured list, and they're like, we want 7 defensemen in addition to Victor, and therefore we're going to keep Carlisle. We don't know that. Like, we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out. What we heard about Hedman's status, though, was that it was not serious. And, you know, we'll see if he's... At this point, he hasn't been on the ice, so I kind of think it's unlikely that he's going to play Saturday, and hopefully they can just get him ready for the opener a week from tonight. Those are my initial thoughts on who was reassigned and kind of your spidey sense about, like, if a player needs to clear waivers, there is risk. It's much less risky to send players down who don't have to clear waivers. And to that end, you know, Stahoviak, who I thought had a great camp and a great preseason, doesn't have to clear waivers. No. So he was reassigned. And then Dominic James. So James got hurt. I think the Lightning would like to see James play in at least one more game. So from that standpoint, it makes sense that he is sticking around. Do I expect a guy with 0 games of NHL experience who is waiver exempt to make the opening night roster?
Right.
I don't expect that. But this way, James at least gets in the game tonight, and who knows, maybe in the game on Saturday too, and then the Lightning could send him down. But if they send James down, you're only at 13 forwards. And if they want to start the season with 14, that means one of these other guys would be coming back up. So kind of stay tuned.
The Finley one was the probably the most interesting guy because of everything we discussed on the show, and it feels like he's going to be on the roster.
I think that's pretty much
safe
set
to say,
now.
Right? That's safe to say.
Yeah.
The 8 defenseman part, you bring up a good point about Hedman's status. We also talked about how there is competition on the back end, and those guys have all played well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have. There could be some.
And
of
I don't
that.
need to take anything away from Declan Carlisle.
Yeah.
He's had a very good
He's
camp.
looked good.
But I just think if you're looking at the other 7, I don't think there's any way Max Crozier does not start the season
Correct.
on the NHL roster. And then you got the other 6.
Yep. I
So
think
really the question is, are you going to keep 8 and 13
Yeah.
forwards? And it didn't seem like that was really the direction the Lightning wanted to go.
No. And I think, it's the waiver situation with guys like Finley and Crozier to a lesser extent, but I think also for Crozier, it's all right. Now we've established he's made the team. Most likely, obviously, things can change, but is he going to play regularly?
Mm-hmm.
That would be the next step.
Right.
Tonight would be a good test. Now, do you have the lineup tonight as
do.
well?
Yeah.
Why don't
So
we
I
give
mean,
people-
the lines make a lot of sense based on what we saw in training camp, like in the practices. So you got Gensel, Point, Kucherov. You've got
sense.
Hagel, Sorelli, Gonsalves, and Gage has been given an opportunity at the start of training camp to play with Sorelli and Hagel, and I think Coop wants to see how that works. I think that will be a line at the start of the year. And speaking bluntly, it's kind of up to Gage Gonsalves to show the coaches that this was the right move. Because we know Coop has a quick trigger finger, and that has been a roving position in the time that Hagel and Sorelli have been kind of paired together, which was mostly last year and also some the year before. Remember, Hagel played some with Point and Kucherov before Jake Gensel arrived. Last year with Gensel on that line, it was mostly Hagel and Sorelli. So that's the second line.
Right.
Gord, Bjorkstrand, Chafee. Geeky started camp playing with those two guys. That switch was made a couple of days ago when they were just having a practice. I think it speaks to maybe the camp and preseason Chafee has had. And then your fourth line is Geeky on the left, James in the middle, and Finley on the right. Now, there may be a couple of things at play here. First of all, James is a center.
Right.
Does that mean that Jack Finley is not going to take faceoffs tonight? No. I think that if it makes sense for Finley to take a faceoff, he will take a faceoff. But remember, we were talking yesterday, like, what if Finley has to start the year to be in the lineup? He has to play right wing and take
Good point.
faceoffs.
Yeah, good point.
Give him a chance tonight, right? The D is interesting. You got Moser and Crozier. You have got, let me look this up before I start speaking out of turn. Chernak is in the lineup tonight.
It's interesting because Mosher and Hedman obviously are usually the pair, and now you
Right,
Crozier
and
in
Hedman
that
is
situation.
out. So
Yeah.
is it that Crozier is kind of a placeholder? Sorry, I should have called this.
Or
up.
it's going to be
I
when
have
Henny's
it here.
back, it'll
Okay.
be Crozier and Hedman.
Well, yes. Carlisle is playing with Chernak and Lilleberg is playing with Radish. So, for those fans out there who are like, Max Crozier needs to play, what I'm seeing here is, in a way, Crozier and Carlisle are placeholders for Hedman and McDonough. And they have the third pair is
Yeah, that's
Lilleberg
fair.
Radish.
That's fair to look at it. Yeah, that's fair.
Do I think
wouldn't
Max
argue that.
Crozier is
No.
going to be like the extra defenseman and not play at all this year? Of course not.
No.
Like he is going
No.
to get in.
He's gonna get
But
in.
at least that's how I read how they ran the D.
Do you think, speculation, obviously, at Bolts Radio, and we have a lot of questions we want to get to, not only from yesterday, but today as well. You mentioned Chafee being on the third line. Is that a product of kind of his camp and what he's done? could you say the same thing in the other way for Geeky on a fourth line? You know, did they not see enough? In other words, was it more about players performing well, or Geeky maybe not
Geeky
getting
had a very
to
good
spot?
game in Orlando.
He did.
I mean, look, they're kind of dipping their toe in the pool and seeing what's what here. And the way the lineup is constructed tonight, this way you have a righty Chafee playing right wing, you have a righty Finley playing right wing.
Yeah.
And you're not asking Geeky to, although I guess Geeky would be on the left if Bjorkstrand was the right winger on the line with Gord. So I don't know. That's a John Cooper question. I'm not going to try and read into it. I think that Chafee has had a good camp, though.
The question I think too is when
maybe
Paul
it may
comes
be more that than anything about Geeky.
When Paul comes back, I think he's your third line center. And now it becomes you have Gord as your fourth line center.
We're still a month away, though,
It
Greg,
is.
at
We are.
least. And like Julian has said, kind of beginning to mid-November is the return date. Expected
it'll be a
return
little
date for Paul. A lot can happen between now and then. Somebody else might get hurt, unfortunately. Hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, like sometimes these like hypotheticals never really come to pass
Never do.
because the injury situation takes care of it.
They never
the
do, but
coach.
it's good for talk shows.
Yes, it is good for talk shows.
Jason on YouTube says, with the new trade deadline rules making it difficult for anyone to take on money in playoff salary cap, do you think the depth of Plumbers this preseason will pay off more in the past?
So I do think it will affect the trade deadline, Jason, but a couple things to remember. So I actually asked Julian this at the media day because I wasn't completely sure I understood it. So how does the playoff salary cap work? Is it like a different number? Because you're only dressing 20. You can have as big a roster as you want, too, in the playoffs. So, like, you can expand your roster. That's why they have they call them the black aces. They bring up these extra guys. So he said, it's the same number. Like, the cap ceiling is the same, but instead of fitting 23 under that cap number, like you're adding up everyone's AAV, it has to be at or under whatever that number is, you have 20. So you have a little extra room there. I wouldn't say it's a lot of room, but if you're removing 3 salaries from basically what your game lineup is going to be, or removing 3 salaries to get to what your game lineup is going to be, you're going to have a little more room, honestly. So does that mean that we're only going to see like guys basically making the league minimum moved at the deadline? Probably not. The thing you could do is, you could take a swing on somebody who's making, let's say, big money. Maybe you have a guy in LTIR, so you can fit it, right? Like Ed explained how that's working now. You can only accept a certain amount of the salary to go toward LTIR. But if you add a salary, let's say you have the room, you add a salary. Maybe it means that you can't dress, for lack of a better term, your 20 most expensive players in the playoffs. But this player that you are getting is going to really, really help you. And maybe you work your lineup in a way that, you're able to fit it at or under the cap, but also, be able to use this player that you acquired at the deadline that is more than just basically a fourth line, grinder. We're going to see. I mean, the GMs are all over this. And we may take a year or two to see how it plays out too, Greg. Like a team might get very creative. Pick a marquee pending free agent who's available at the trade deadline, who's making big money. If that player moves at the deadline and then that team in the playoffs is able to do some, I don't mean like below board, I mean like legitimately, but kind of do some fancy tap dancing to make the cap number work, even means they maybe have to sit a guy who's making a little bit more, and they do well in the playoffs, teams are going to copycat that.
Sure.
So I'm not willing, Jason, to say today that this is what it's going to do to the trade deadline. I think there's a general acceptance that, it is going to affect what happens at the deadline. But I think if there's an attractive player out there, teams are going to be like, we want that player, and we'll figure out the salary cap part once we get to the playoffs. It's just about who you're dressing in your lineup. There's no restriction on what the roster, the actual playoff roster looks like. It's the game roster. It's those 20 players that you're dressing for a playoff game. That's the part that needs to be cap compliant.
And if you have a player on long-term IR who doesn't come back until the playoffs, you have to still be cap compliant and factor in his salary, correct?
Well, but that player wouldn't be. It's only who's dressing.
Right.
So, yeah, if a guy that's the Barkov situation.
Yeah, that's the Barkov situation.
So, let's say the Panthers, we asked Ed this question. So, if they decide to get the full relief of Barkov's $10 million contract, he cannot play in the playoffs. But if they're like, you know what, maybe he's going to come back. So, they take a portion of that. They kind of weave their way through the regular season. They get in the playoffs. Barkov is able to come back. Barkov can play, but that $10 million salary by dressing Barkov now counts against the cap.
Right.
So your other 19 players plus Barkov's salary for a playoff game has to be at or under whatever the cap number is.
You could be, I mean, theoretically, in that case, if you mismanage the cap, you could be short a player in a game, correct?
Well, I mean, you would just
it's
have
unlikely.
to dress. I don't know that you would be short a player. You would just have to play a bunch of guys maybe that are making the league minimum. I mean, you're going to have those players, right?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. We'll
Yeah,
see how that plays out.
it is gonna create a few wrinkles and maybe headaches for the capologists on these teams, but I think most people feel that it's probably in line with the spirit of the rule because let's be honest, like a lot of people were really irked about the long-term injury.
Right.
And I mean, yes, we heard it about Kucherov in 2021, but the Lightning weren't the only team. I mean, certainly the Panthers benefited last year because they were able to add Jones and Marchand at the deadline and then bring back Tkachuk for the playoffs.
Not bad, right?
Yeah. So
you're allowed to do it. That's okay.
Under the rules this year, they wouldn't have been able. They could have brought Tkachuk back, but they couldn't have dressed the same lineup. They would have been over the cap.
Dusty the dog on X says, can you comment on the shorter preseason next year? Does that mean fewer players invited?
Very good question, Dusty. I think we're all kind of wondering this. I ran into Mike Peterson in Orlando because he heads up the Lightning's internal analytic department. He's not working for one of these like third-party websites. So Mike has been with the organization for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So I saw him in the press box and we were just chatting about the preseason. I'm like, are we coming back to Orlando next year? He's like, I have no idea. And he didn't even really know much about it, honestly. Now he's in the analytics department. He's not necessarily dealing with the schedule, but that's kind of what I've heard from a lot of people, both with the Lightning and with other teams. I think what we know is, and Steve Versnick mentioned this, that whenever we played the Orlando game, whatever it was 2 nights ago, September 30th, that might be when the regular season is starting next year. So you can just look at the dates. The training camp period will be shorter. I don't think they're bumping everything back. So training camp and the preseason will be in a more condensed schedule. Therefore, it will be more difficult to play as many games as teams are used to playing. Also, They are capping them from what we heard at 6. The Lightning have played 7 for however many years. So, but even that, I mean, I'm not sure that I've heard people say, yes, it's definitely minimum 4, maximum 6. I mean, we heard that from Steve, but I haven't actually seen anything from the league definitively stating that that's the case. But the question, Dusty, is a good one. What will this mean for that prospect showcase? All right, Steve just wrote, season starts 9/29. It will be 4 preseason games for every team. So Steve found that somewhere. Thank you, Steve.
Nice job, Steve.
And
give him a 3rd star tonight.
Is what I read since that conversation. So since he told us. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens right now, like kind of when things get going in the second week of September until the start of the regular season. That whole schedule is going to get condensed because they're adding 2 regular season games. We're going to play 84 next year. So you got to take stuff out. I don't know if it's going to affect the prospect showcase. I don't know if it's going to affect kind of the prospect camp leading up to the showcase. I don't know if it's going to shorten the number of days that they just like before they play the first preseason game. We do know there are going to be fewer preseason games, but I think management likes to see players. So the minimum 4, I'm curious how many teams will actually play only 4. They may look to squeeze in some more. I mean, I was talking to the Panthers people. They're like, yeah, that doubleheader with Nashville that we do every year is probably gonzo. And I'm kind of like, I wonder if more teams are going to do doubleheaders because you can fit 2 games into one day.
Good point.
And you can see a lot of players, We'll see.
Logan says, Gage Gonsalves has a different attitude this season, and it's great. The way he skates and things from what I've seen so far is totally different from last year. An NHL mentality is going to keep him going.
I thought he had a good camp last year, and then he got hurt, if you remember.
Yeah.
And when he came up, so he went to Syracuse, got healthy, played, got called up, had a very, very good kind of debut, and maybe a couple games after that with the Lightning. Not debut, because he had debuted the year before, but his first couple of games last year. And then it dipped. So we went back to Syracuse, and when he came up the second time, I mean, his game just continued to grow right to the end of the regular season, to the point that you can make the argument he was one of the most impactful players the Lightning had in that Florida series.
Yeah.
Which is quite a statement. So, yes, I kind of agree that he's at a different point in his career, but I'm not willing to concede that he had a poor camp last year. He had a good camp last year. He might have made the Lightning's roster had he stayed healthy right off the bat.
Gonsalves, Geeky, and Chaffee are 3 players that are going to need to have consistency in their game if they want to stay currently where they are, or in Geeky's case, rise. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty fair to say. I think most people you talk to, they like what Gonsalves did at the end of last year. They're giving him opportunity to be potentially here in a top 6 partner to start. I don't think that's cemented in any way. I think the same thing for Chaffee. I think third line is probably where he's best suited, maybe 4th. We can argue what that means. The shots there, I think chippiness, playing with some sandpaper is essential to his game. And if he does that, I think he has a chance to stay in the bottom 6. Geeky, I don't anticipate being in the bottom on the bottom line, but for me, it's maybe a little bit of a show me. And so those are 3 players I'm keeping my eye on this year for sure.
I'll say this about Gonsalves and Geeky. I mean, you want to throw in Chaffee. To me, Chaffee's in a little bit of a different boat because, I mean, I guess he's not that much older than Gage Gonsalves, but Gonsalves still kind of feels like a prospect who's acclimated in the NHL game and took great strides last year, and want to see that continue. But just remember, unless something weird happens, Gonsalves is not going to see a lot of power play time. He's going to be on, if he's on a unit, it's the second unit. The second unit doesn't play a lot just because Cooch and company tend to stay out there for much of the power play, and sometimes they score, right? So the power play ends. Same with Geeky. And neither player, I don't believe, will be used on penalty kill, which wouldn't really be a point producer situation for either one of them. But what I'm saying is probably most of their production is going to have to come 5-on-5. So I'm kind of saying this with caution. Don't get married to the point total, because players who play a lot on the power play have more of an opportunity to pad their point total and their goal total, frankly. And unless something weird happens, I don't think either one of those guys, and Chaffee as well. I mean, we talked about Chaffee maybe as a righty getting into that top unit right now. That's not really in the cards. So the production that they are going to provide will probably have to come primarily 5-on-5, or it's harder to score than on the power play.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
From Wooden on YouTube, what are your thoughts on the 3rd and 4th line tonight? I think an opportunity.
I'm just curious to see how the regulars that haven't played a lot play.
Agreed. And I want to see how some of the younger guys go against a more traditional NHL lineup here. I want to see Finley. I want to see how Geeky responds, partner to being on a 4th line. I mean, I don't care if that's regular season, preseason, postseason. That doesn't sit well for a guy who feels like probably I'm a top 6 forward. I got to show it. What does Geeky do tonight to say, I don't belong on this line? No offense, but show me.
Yeah.
I anticipate a pretty intense game tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. So I've got the roster for the. I mean, it's like, how much is the temperature going to rise? Because Hagel's in the lineup tonight, Ekblad's in the lineup tonight. You know what happened? You know, and I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing. I mean, look, it was
a serious
awful.
play, right?
Like it was a disgusting hit, and Ekblad got rightly suspended for it. The question is it over and done with? Hagel was asked about it, and he's like, not so much the hit, but more that we lost. So we'll see. But so the Panthers are dressing 20, of course. The two goalies, Bussy, who played against the Lightning in Orlando, and Daniil Tarasov, who they got from Columbus. Mm-hmm. Both have played in the preseason. I would expect Tarasov is going to play tonight. Bobrovsky is not even dressing. But he has played in the preseason. I know that he got into a period at least, or maybe half a game, when they played their one home game. So of the 18 skaters, 6 of the 18 have played in a game. The other 12 have not played in a game yet. So that kind of tells you about what the Panthers preseason has looked like. And of the 6 that have played, 2 of them are completely new to the organization. Luke Cunnin, I mean, these aren't not guys new to the NHL, but the Panthers had to supplement a little bit. I mean, they brought a lot of players back, but like Nate Schmidt, who was a pretty good player for them last year and certainly impactful in that series against the Lightning, like they couldn't keep him. So Jeff Petrie is the other. Jeff Petrie, I think, is 37 years old.
Played for the Canadians, right?
In and out of the lineup. The last couple of years in Detroit. When the Lightning played the Red Wings last year, we did not see Petrie. At least I don't remember him.
I feel like he's had injury issues too.
He's had injury issues. Yeah. So this is a little bit of a product of who can we get. I don't know if he is going to be slated to be in their top 6 or he's their 7th. So of the 6, Petrie's played 1 game. Cunnin has played 1 game. The other 4 guys are all like bottom forward guys. Jesper Boquist has played 1 game. Jonah Gadjevich has played 1 game. Maki Samoskevich has played 1 game. And AJ Greer has played 1 game. They're all in tonight. These are the guys who are making their preseason debuts. Seth Jones, Aaron Ekblad, Dmitry Kulikov, Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Anton Lundell, Evan Rodriguez, Carter Verhaeghe, Eetu Luostarinen, Gustav Forsling, Brad Marchand, and Nico Mikula, who just signed an 8-year extension. That's their team. I mean, there may be some players here that I'm like not thinking of off the top of my head. Bobrovsky, certainly.
Lundell. Did you mention Lundell?
Lundell's in. Yeah.
Lundell's in. Okay.
I mean, Barkov's hurt. Matthew Tkachuk's hurt. Tomasz Nosek's hurt. So they aren't available regardless. And, they have to give these guys, I mean, I would think that these guys would want at least 1 game, right? I don't know if they're going to play in most of these guys are going to play in both the games. I haven't actually seen the Panthers cuts, like in what's left on their roster. But I'm curious to see how they look. I mean, most of these guys haven't played in a game since June.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So it might be ugly, but it might just be guys are like, you know what? We need to kind of get ready for the regular season, and what happened in last year's series, we'll kind of put a pin in that until we see each other later in the year. They played 3 of the 4 games against each other in the first half of the year. I think 1's in November and 2 are in December. So it's not one of those deals where they're not going to see each other until February or March.
It's just a game like this. I mean, I think it's going to get a little chippy, and that's okay. Let's just see what that means. From FKA322 on YouTube. This was from yesterday. I attended the game the other night, and they appeared a lot tighter than they were in Orlando. Last year, passes were crisp, and most everyone seemed to know their roles. So an observation on how they looked in that game.
Well, part of it was last year, the Orlando game, I think, was the 2nd game of the preseason. So it may have been, I mean, the Lightning didn't really bring a quote-unquote NHL-heavy roster to Orlando, but they had NHL guys. I mean, they had Moser, they had Radish. We talked about that. Bjorkstrand.
Yeah.
So it was a more condensed training camp roster when they played the game. But also this goes to what we were saying. Like, the Lightning have had a good preseason.
Very good
And the players that were in contention for spots have played well, pretty much without exception.
Tampa Bay on X says, I don't know how you guys feel about Geeky so far, but I'm not too sold on him. I get he's still young and he's got a big frame, but nothing really stands out to me.
Well, I respectfully disagree. He has played in 3 games, and I think he's had 2 pretty impactful games. I mean, if you followed the Orlando game, watched it, listened to it, read about it, whatever, like, he had a pretty impactful game in Orlando. So he is a big body, and he's worked on his skating, but I don't think his skating was ever an issue, like, kind of accelerating and going in a straight line. It's more when you're big, it's kind of like the quickness component and like shifting side to side, stopping, starting. I mean, that's probably a lot of what he worked on. I know a lot of our colleagues on the Lightning broadcast have talked about kind of making sure he can sustain it too. Like, so he starts a shift and make sure he sustains it. And a lot of that is just off-season training. But like, I mean, Greg, we have talked about this. He has a high-end shot. So for a guy like that, he needs to be able to put himself in a position to get the shot off, right? But like the fan was saying, he doesn't really, I don't see anything that he does other than being big. Like, watch how this guy shoots the puck. Also, he's got, the usual like talent of going to a place where he needs to go to score a goal or making a pass to a player who was open. Like, he showed all of that.
Yeah.
For him, it's about, I would think he would say the same thing. For him, it's about consistency.
Right.
And it's not easy to jump into the NHL at 20. It's not.
Right.
I mean, it's even more rare to see the 18-year-olds do it, which is why that number is like pretty much limited to the Crosbys and the McDavids and the Stamkos, is like the Hedmans. Like, those guys can come in at 18, and even they sometimes take a little bit of time to get acclimated. It's still no small feat to come in at 20, which is what he did last year. He played 50 games last year, played 4 playoff games. That's really valuable experience, but his game is going to grow. It's just as opposed to a guy like, they're not the same player, but opposed to a guy like Gage Gonsalves. Like, Gonsalves spent 20 through 23 mostly in Syracuse, building up his game, right? So we're seeing a guy who was a little bit more polished just based on his reps at the pro level.
I also think when you're a player like that who has the pedigree and potential to be in a top 6, and you're not necessarily in that role, and it could be because you don't earn it, but you've been up and down, you go to the minors, you're on a 3rd and 4th line. I mean, Phil goes back and says if you are that type of player, preferably you're playing in a top 6. The Lightning, this is a difficult lineup to crack in the top 6.
Yeah.
That's a hard adjustment to make. I want to make that very clear. The onus is on the player to develop and to be productive in whatever role he's in, but let's have an honest conversation about it. Connor Geekie, in a perfect world or in an ideal world for him, is being more productive in a top 6, playing with skilled players who can get him the puck with that big shot than he is playing 8 minutes a night on a 4th line with guys who might be more of a dump and chase. Now, the game has changed over the last 10 years where your 3rd line still has a lot of skill, but I do think you have to give some grace to the player, meaning Connor Geekie in this situation, that it may take him a little bit of time, Dave, to start clicking offensively until he finds some continuity, I think, with like-minded players. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something just to be cognizant of. But I think a lot of players struggle in that space who are of his skill set. Code Rez on YouTube says Stakoviak has to make this team. This is from yesterday, and play 3rd line right wing with Gord and Bjorkstrand. Hell, maybe even up on line 2 right wing with Hagel and Cirelli. That line would be hard to play against.
So I will just point out, Wojtek Stachowiak is the center.
Yeah.
So it's all well and good to say, well, let's just put him here. Like, and again, I don't know enough about this guy in the role that he played in Europe, on his German team. Maybe he played some wing. When we have seen him in the preseason, he's been at center. He's been very, very effective at center. Lightning have a logjam at center. Was that part of the reason he was sent to Syracuse? Maybe. The waiver part might have factored in too. I mean, you mentioned Phil. Phil, as a center, tends to get irked when he sees centers not being used at center. Now, the reality is the Lightning have more centers than they have slots open at center. So some centers have to play wing. But at least in Phil's mind, a center who played center, it was very effective at center. If you grew up playing center and that's your position, that's where you should play.
I agree.
And for Stahoviak, who is new to North America after being away, like it's a smaller rink, like he has fit in great. If you've listened to any of our shows in the preseason, you've heard me singing this guy's praises. But I wonder if, the fan is just saying we should keep him because he impressed, which he did. And if the only way to keep him is to put him at wing, then do it. Well, it's not always that simple, You're asking a guy to play a different position.
Yeah. Makes sense. Got to keep that all in perspective. Don on YouTube says, what do you think the Lightning could do with a Roman Schmidt type player? I always think that Radish is too nice, as was Perbix. Attackers have no fear going up against them.
Again, I respectfully disagree. Darren Radish has played very, very well for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He is not Roman Schmidt, but he doesn't have to be Roman Schmidt. I don't think you want 6 Darren Radish type players on your blue line, but you also don't want 6 Roman Schmidt type players on your blue line. You want a mix, right? Darren Radish is one of the hardest slap shots on the Lightning and maybe in the NHL. That is a skill set that he brings to the lineup. You can use him on the power play. He is very, very smooth in terms of stick handling and traffic and, making plays in tight spaces. He's smart. He has very, very good offensive instincts. But yeah, he's not 6'6", 230 or whatever. But that's not his game.
I was just going to say, that's not who he is. Now, if you just want to have somebody like that in the lineup because you feel he's impactful and the way you're doing that is by taking Radish out, I think that's probably the wrong way to look at it. If Roman Schmidt's ready to play, they'll find him in the lineup somewhere. Chernak's a thumper. We know that. I think they could be more physical on the back end, but you don't want to force something like that. And when I say physical, there's a difference between being good positionally and being somebody who likes to rub you out of the play in a big way. Schmidt potentially could be that guy. We'll see. But I think those guys develop differently too. I think you have to make sure he's consistent in his game defensively first, partner, before you put him in the lineup because you think he just provides that physical presence and he's a big body. A lot of those guys maybe sometimes are chasing a big hit and you put yourself out of position. And I think a guy like Schmidt, no doubt, is on their radar, but who's coming out?
Yeah. He's also, second-year pro.
Right.
Give the guy some games. He's a little bit older because he had an overage year in junior, but I think that it was the right move for him and for the organization to have him go down to Syracuse and work on where he left off last year. Pick up where he left off last year, where he was named most improved player on Syracuse. That's fantastic.
Good point. Good point by you. Paul on YouTube, is it consistency or is it hunger? This year it seems like we have younger guys who are hungrier to make it and will push a little hard than the older guys in our bottom 6.
Well, I do not think that when we have seen the top guys in these preseason games, we haven't seen a lot of them. We haven't seen all. I think we have seen all of them, but most of them have been in one game. They have not played with the same level of hunger, but that's to be expected. I think that we've seen that from opposing teams too. Let's see what happens when the regular season starts.
Yeah, and the whole hunger thing, there is a different sense of urgency for some of these players in preseason than the regulars. I think you just have to factor all of that in, partner, when you start evaluating these players. But that being said, as we've often talked about, you can only go off of where you are in the season. And if you're just playing preseason games, you might as well do well in them. That's the way you build. And some of these guys have opened up the eyes of the organization in terms of where they are. Some of it is a numbers game. Some of it is just waivers, not waivers. But all of those players we talked about to a degree, made the Lightning think a little bit harder on what they wanted to do. And I think that's all positive.
And the last thing I'll say, I'm agreeing with you, but fans, don't take it from me, don't take it from Greg, take it from Julian Breezebaugh. I think I mentioned when he spoke to the staff on Monday, one of the words he used to describe kind of the atmosphere in the Lightning room among the guys who played last year and have been with the team was hunger. I mean, That was the word he used. He's like, I think our guys are hungry after having lost to Florida last year. More hungry. Like, he actually, maybe he didn't say more hungry, but he said, I sense a hunger, disappointment after the season that we had in the regular season last year that we went out in the first round. And that's a good sign. So that would run contrary to what the fan was saying. But again, if the fan is just basing it on like how Kucherov looked in that one preseason game, I mean, Kucherov is, he's going to do what he needs to do to get ready for the regular season. Let's see how things look when they drop the puck and the games count, right, next week.
100%. Steve on Facebook says Dominic James and Wojtek Stachowiak have both been obvious pleasant surprises in this camp. Both are waiver exempt. James got hurt. He'll be back in the lineup tonight. With that said, why'd Stachowiak get sent down, but James is still with the Bolts? You can send both down anytime, and both deserve to still be here now.
So I think James is getting a game tonight because he wasn't able to play in Orlando. I think the Lightning want to see him play another game, and he was hurt. So I think that's the answer. That's my best guess. Why was Stachowiak sent down? Well, the Lightning basically got to their NHL group plus a few. And whether it was that he didn't have to clear waivers, whether it was they just want him to play in Syracuse at the start of the year, whether it was the center versus the wing thing that we talked about just a few minutes ago, Greg, it wasn't anything that he did poorly. He was fantastic in camp and in the preseason games in which he played. At least in my opinion, I've called every minute of them. And he was impactful even when he wasn't producing points. So just because he was sent down doesn't mean that he's not going to come back up. I think he made the impression that he wanted to make. The fan is like, well, why did they send him down? Well, you got to send I mean, you can only keep 23.
Right.
And I think you have been spot on with the Finley thing, that Finley fits a role on this team. Finley, there is a risk they may lose him if they send him down. He is ready. He's a fourth-year pro. They've worked with this guy since they drafted him. It's time. And they need a right-handed center.
Right.
If he can fill that role, that would be fantastic for them. And then the other spot, I honestly think if they keep 14, maybe Peltier or Kachuk. I think that may be how it plays out. But they're getting him through waivers now, so they have a little bit more freedom as we get closer to kind of setting the roster deadline. That's a guess on my part. But I don't think it says anything negative about Stachowiak and his play. He was great.
Keep in mind, too, these guys are going to get an opportunity to come up in the NHL and play this year. I think Wojtek has earned that.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's got to do pretty well down in Syracuse, but let's say he does. Why not? Peltier, same thing.
Yeah.
And they've given themselves some options here. And don't forget, Peltier had a two-way contract his first year.
Yeah.
Which, does that all factor into the equation? I'm sure when it's close like this and the competition is tight, you take everything into consideration. You have to. Christina says, I think Moser, she's on X, looks much better on the left than the right. Also, Crozier can play up to 39 more NHL games this season before having to pass through waivers. She said, can see that info on Puckpedia waiver tracker.
I need to go on to Puckpedia. So
that's pretty good.
Yes. I got to look up Crozier now. So I know that there is some kind of component where if you hit a certain number of NHL games, you go from waiver exempt to needing waivers. And of course, while I'm talking, it's going to be hard for me to look it up, but I'm going to do my best. So I believe JJ has had a very good preseason. I made him a star in the game in Orlando. I'm calling up Crozier right now, by the way. So I think the reason for this is his third year pro, because his first year he only got into 9 games, which wasn't really his first year. It was his final year in college. So his first full year pro was 23-24. Last year was his second year. So Crozier right now is third year pro. Normally that would mean that he is waiver exempt. But if he has played a certain number of NHL games, then that goes away. So in other words, a defenseman like Crozier came out of college. His first year, he plays 50 NHL games. The next year, maybe 50 is the wrong number, but you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
For skaters, is typically 160 NHL games. So basically, like if you play a couple full seasons, so that's a better way of putting it. Let's say a college player turns pro. His first 2 years plays the full season. By year 3, theoretically, because he's third year pro, he could be waiver exempt. But if he hits 160 NHL games, he is not. So that was what the fan was looking at. I have liked Moser on the left and the right. I think he has played on the right less, though, because he's normally there with Hedman. Hedman only played 1 period. So I think it's a little early to say he looks better on the left than the right. He showed last year he can play the right. I think the bigger takeaway is like he is clearly healthy and he's playing at a high level. In a lot of these games where it's kind of, I keep using this phrase like helter-skelter, right? Because you got a weird mix of veterans and younger guys in lineups. But Moser is just handling it. I thought he was great in the Orlando game. And the game in which Hedman got hurt, he played, 26, 27 minutes? He was really good in that game, too. Let's see how he looks tonight with Crozier.
He's a big component of what they want to do this year because he solidifies their top 4. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you right now, if he falters in any way, or if one of the young guys play well, and this was the conversation I think you and I were having, I think Brian Engblom was bringing it up, is Moser a guy they could drop to the third pairing if they wanted to try and do righty-lefty, and
at the expense of Lilleberg. That's kind of what it would be.
Right. So I don't know. What did Steve text us here? On X, Vasilevsky will not dress tonight. The belief is that he's in line to play on Saturday.
I think they'd like him to get a game.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and look and see if he's only had a preseason, except for the preseason that he missed, of course, but like a preseason in which he's only played 1 game. Maybe not, but I'm pretty sure there have been preseasons where he's only played 2 games. Like he misses the whole first week. They give him the whole first week off, and maybe he plays 2 of the final 3.
Right.
So he'll get the 1 game on Saturday, and then, he'll get several days to kind of get ready for the opener on Thursday. But that's good news. For the fans that were on eggshells about, oh my gosh, what's going on with him? I mean, he's back practicing. It's been a few days. They had the day off yesterday. But, I mean, he's been back practicing for a couple of days, and he's slated to get a game. That's all very positive.
I hope they're not on eggshells.
It's hard to stand on eggshells.
It's hard to stay on eggshells. These are things out of your control.
Yeah.
I get it. But kind of putting a bow on all of this, I think the Lightning's training camp to date has done exactly what they wanted it to do. It did provide competition. It still is. You're seeing some guys, maybe for the first time, that have opened up your eyes. I think your depth in the minor leagues now is better. And, yeah, you're dealing with an injury here and there. No lineup is 100% ready to go to start the regular season. There may be some exceptions, but there's people banged up. But the Lightning, now, I don't know, partner, how you feel. Their play has been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The depth has been nice. And, I know people want to talk about the power play. That is going to be a continuous thing throughout the year that we will evaluate. But I think if you had to grade the Lightning up to this point, I mean, you're giving them a B plus mark, maybe even an A, based off of just what did you want to see, what has happened, and overall health. And if Vasi plays in the next game and is ready to go, you dodged the biggest bullet of all the camps, and I think that's all you can ask for. So I think high marks so far all the way around.
Yep.
And that's hard to do sometimes in preseason. Curious again to see take the temperature tonight. The fans, what that'll be like tonight. A little bit different than maybe most preseason games. Who knows? What does the game entail in terms of how chippy we see tonight things develop? And I think for the most part, it's going to be a preseason game you're going to keep your eye on, I would think, across the league.
Yeah.
And more so than...
And they play again on Saturday, too.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing just based on numbers, most of the players playing tonight will also be in the lineup on Saturday for both teams.
That is correct. So it should be a fun time to break it all down tomorrow. Of course, the game tonight is at 7, which means we'll be on the airwaves at 6:30. And is Phil with you tonight?
Phil is back. That's what I heard. He told me
Phil
he was going to be back for the game.
He'll be ready to rock and roll tonight.
He will be
Get his
ready to
thoughts.
rock and roll.
I always like it, we do that little segment before you guys can go on to kick it to him, and sometimes he goes down memory lane a little bit
Yes,
when he played, and it's always pretty fun. I may ask him, I'm giving it away, I may ask him about tonight and the Panthers, and does it add a little extra juice to it, or is it just your typical preseason game? I'm sure he'll have some thoughts on who stayed.
Yeah.
And who has
you
been
may
down.
ask him the center question.
Yeah.
Like if somebody is playing center and there's no room at center, is it better for that player to go to the minors
Yeah.
and play his natural position?
That could be a good follow-up on you. I could ask him,
Yeah.
what do you think about the game tonight? Some of the cuts that have been made. David, what do you think? And then it gets right to you, and then that's always a pretty good time. But that'll be fun. And then you and I will be breaking it down tomorrow,
Yes.
getting ready for that last preseason game on Saturday. And then the regular season. When's the first regular season game in the NHL?
Tuesday
It's
are
Tuesday,
the first
right?
games. I know the Panthers raise their banner. They host the Blackhawks, which the Lightning had that in 2021. Remember that? That first game was
remember
against
that.
Chicago, and they raised the banner. I'm actually going to go to the schedule here. So let's see.
Let's go to the
Tuesday.
schedule.
I'm scrolling ahead. Tuesday, October 7th. Blackhawks at Panthers, 5 p.m. Penguins at Rangers. Mike Sullivan.
Is that
He's
a
not going
revenge
back
game?
to Pittsburgh, but he's
I know. Is that a
welcoming his
revenge
former
game?
team. 8 p.m. And then Avalanche
Yeah.
at Kings, 10:30. 3 games on that
Interesting.
first night.
Interesting.
Remember the Lightning had that game, what was it, 2 years ago? They played Nashville, and it was like 4:30 or something like that. Maybe it was 5.
Yeah.
It was a Tuesday. It was strange. So the Panthers have that.
Right.
I think if you're the defending champs, you should get the 8 o'clock game and make the Rangers and Penguins play at 5. But I'm not setting the TV schedule.
You bring up a good point, but we'll see how it transpires. But the preseason is almost over, and
Yes.
I think for a lot of us, we're ready to get this going. So it should be a lot of fun. But partner, I will talk to you tonight
Yeah, see you tonight.
for the broadcast, and then we'll do our show tomorrow noon to 1. Thanks to all involved who helped here, Steve Ersnick and Jared Johnston. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.